Okay, we're going to go ahead and do our program. Our speaker today is Kelly Brock, Senior Travel Specialist at the Bluffton AAA office. Kelly has worked in the travel industry for over 30 years and has spent 21 years of those years at the Bluffton AAA office. She has traveled extensively, including exotic locales such as Africa, India, Nepal, the United Arab Emirates, Southeastern Asia, and South America, as well as more popular destinations such as Europe, Canada, the Caribbean, and the U.S. She has earned several industry awards, including AAA's top producing sales agent in North America. More importantly, Kelly simply has a passion for people and a love of the travel industry. Kelly would like to answer questions that you have today. And so already some of our members have put some questions in chat. And I had generated some questions from a few members prior to today, and we've sent those to Kelly too. So we'll be using those. But if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in chat, and we will get to them. She's not going to do a presentation per se, but the presentation is the response to your questions. And her questions are grouped into the following categories, just kind of a general category about travel that applies to a lot of different types of travel, and then hotel, airlines, and cruises. So just go ahead and submit your questions and we'll get to them. And so without further ado, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Kelly to get started with us. And so you can begin, Kelly, and then when you're ready for questions, we can start.
Well, thank you very much. You're going to make me cry because this industry means so much to me, you guys, and to have an opportunity to talk to folks, you must have a love for travel if you're in a travel club. And it's been a lonely year per se. I'm working from home. Our office did shut down for several months, and when it opened back up, we are still capacity controlled with the number of employees / members that walk into the office. And I am fully functional at home. Sadly, the job that I've had for my whole adult life has been different for the last year. My job is talking people off the ledge, and it's canceling a lot of trips and rebooking a lot of trips for those that are hopeful. It's fighting for refunds. It's being an advocate for folks that travel, for the consumer, and anything that you may see in the industry. I think that after this all plays out, if you didn't use a travel agent in the past and had some of these struggles that you had to deal with yourself in the last year, you may go towards using that partnership, because there are people, I mean, we heard horror stories of folks that may have booked through online agencies or your Costco's and things like that. And I'm not here to downplay any of it, but that didn't have a human advocating for them. And we deal with every vendor out there. So from cruise lines to tour companies to airlines to hotels, and every fight is different. Every rule is different. Not every vendor out there has been dealing with this pandemic the same way, as far as refunds versus travel credits versus anything that expires. So we have had to learn as we go. And as I've said to everyone I've talked to in the past year, and I've rebooked some trips for people 2 and 3 and now 4 times, because no one expected this situation to last as long as it has. The mental impact has been awful for somebody that loves what they do so much. My saving grace is I get to talk to people and the people that I care about. But the fight is hard. And I would say to you that the script on this travel industry is being written as we go along. So rules that were in play a year ago are different today with some of these. Some cruise lines that your first cancellation, you have that option for 125% future cruise credit. So there's in the pot, or refund. So again, be on top of what rules look like today. And for me, I'm very fortunate to have, I don't like to even talk numbers or anything. A big book of business means a big book of cancellations these days. Let's just call it what it is. So I have a lot on my plate, but I fight for my people. And I'm very, very passionate about that. So with the script being written, there's a whole lot of gray area. And I would say for those of you that have some travel booked right now, or my speech has been, there's a difference in voluntary and involuntary changes, right? So if you voluntarily change your mind to travel, your flexibility on what that means might be different than you waiting for your cruise line, tour company, whatever it is, to cancel on you. By waiting, you may have more flexibility with whatever you're holding on to. Then another step, and there's a handful of questions over here about biking, which we all know and love, but some of these companies that we're all familiar with, when you get to that second now or third or fourth rebook, what you're able to do with your funds, it looks a little different today. And one of the reasons that some of these companies are sweetening the pot with that extra 25% or 10% or whatever it is, because the costs are going to be a bit higher going forward for travel. So it's to offset some of that. It's to encourage you to continue thinking about travel, not just my level of the industry, but your cruise lines, tour companies. They want people to still book travel. They want people to still be excited. I want people to still have something to look forward to. So the message is, don't wait. And one of these questions over here, I'm going to wait to book last minute for 22 to get a better price. That is false, false, false. The name of the game is book early as you can, because everybody's pushing travel off. There's a lot of pent-up demand. And there's a whole lot of travel even into 2023 that's already sold out. So the name of the game is not wait to see what's going to be better. It's to plan now for the mental excitement to look forward to it, but also knowing that you can get out of just about anything you get yourself into these days. It's that flexible. There's flexibility for canceling, rebooking, getting cold feet even at the 11th hour. So do not put your travel plans on hold thinking that you're going to get something better. I just want to get that message out before we get into specific Q&A. But again, the message is it's flexible. It's that voluntary versus involuntary. And when I say voluntary changes or cancellations, and I'm going to use biking as an example since we have some of those, if you've got a trip that you've already, whether it's booked for the first time for the future, whether it's already been rebooked a time or two, and it just doesn't look like it's going to operate. Let's say you have a trip for this September and the jury is still out whether September is going to open up or not. You can voluntarily choose to move forward just because you just don't want this waiting game to see if it's really going to go. And if it is going to go, am I going to feel comfortable to go on that trip? You can make a change yourself. I mean, and this is where your partnership, hopefully with an agent or however you're booking your travel, to go ahead and get ahead of the game again, because there is an availability issue for a lot of 2022. Companies that really hope to have been traveling by this stage of the game, they have nothing to do but wait for the borders to open. So whether or not it's, the cruise lines are ready to begin cruising, there's protocol in place. And I know we're skipping around, and let's go ahead and talk about cruises for a moment. Some cruise lines are tired of waiting for the CDC to make a decision whether they can cruise out of the US. I don't do politics, you guys, but kudos to the governor of Florida for going after the government, saying this industry is losing millions and millions of dollars. So the cruise lines are saying, we're not going to wait around anymore. we're going to go to ports that will let us operate cruises. So in the last couple of weeks, you may or may not have heard that Royal Caribbean's operating cruises out of St. Martin, Crystal's out of the Bahamas. Viking is starting some cruises that they already sold out, but Bermuda and Iceland. Cruise lines are going to Greece to start. So there are some lines that are taking matters into their own hands and are cruising out of ports that are welcoming Americans. And that's what we want to talk about, because there are some cruise lines that have moved their operation to the UK only for UK clientele. But there are cruises that are going to begin operating next month. You just have to fly to different ports to get on those ships, because our government, they're not allowing the ports to open here in the US, aside from American river cruising. So that would be companies like American Cruise Lines. We've seen their boats in our waters the last week even. American Cruise Lines, American Queen Steamboat Company, Victory Cruise Lines, and Uncruise are currently operating US river cruising. It's very, very popular. All of those companies so far, these US river cruises, are requiring vaccinations to board their boats. The jury's out. We don't know what that's going to look like next year if vaccines are going to be required. They're not necessarily required for boarders when we talk about leaving the US, but they're required for, so far we're seeing it in the cruise industry, because I think that they think that's the answer to starting the industry going again. I had a call from a client yesterday. He was just fishing for information, what he can do. And then when he mentioned that his wife is not yet getting vaccinated, that changed the conversation, because he wanted an American river cruise. It's just not accepted yet. So that's a little rundown on what's going on. And I want to kind of run through the questions. And Sherry, I'll look at the questions that have come through on the side, and then we'll go through some of our list. And then you guys, I'm here to answer anything you want. But one of the first questions is, what kind of demand do we see for 2022? And I think I've answered that. There's a lot of demand cruises that are sold out. The smaller the ship, the less availability it may have. So when we talk about even European river cruising, can y'all hear me? Because I've got an error message about my internet. Am I okay?
Yeah, we're hearing you pretty well.
So, okay. The demand is there for 2022. What I will say for the rest of 2021 is folks that I currently have booked haven't yet canceled, but we just don't know. There's a waiting game. If you called me and showed interest in going somewhere this November, I would encourage you to book it, but we still just don't know what would go, whether it would operate or not. Again, we go back to the flexibility of getting out of anything you've gotten yourself into. Going forward to 2022, we feel like that's going to be a transition year, and that it'll be all systems go. So lots of demand, lots of rebooking, because some folks that were hopeful a year ago for 21 and maybe hopeful in, booking earlier this year for later this year are finally saying, we don't want to do that anymore. We just want to book it for next year. So that's affecting the availability of cruising. Big ships, I'm not as concerned with, when we talk about Celebrity, Royal, Holland, Princess, any of the big guys. I'm not as worried, and I'm not hearing as much about things being sold out. But small ship cruising, again, I go back to rivers, riverboats. I also want to talk about, your Oceana, Viking Ocean, Silver Sea, cruises that carry less than 1,000 people. There's an attraction to that type of cruising, smaller crowds. So they are booking. They're very popular.
So,
The next question in our chat is about single supplements. It's how you avoid single supplements when you don't have a roommate. Yes, Sherry?
oh, go ahead.
Am I frozen?
No, you're breaking up a little bit, but go ahead
Okay.
and continue with the
So with single
questions there.
Somebody was asking, Joan asked about single supplements, which is always a topic of conversation. And we've dealt with it here with this club, well, in this market, this demographic, we get that a lot. When we talk about cruises and single supplements, most cruise lines have a 200% supplement. There's no way around it. They're selling that cabin. But there are cruise lines that, well, there are some new ship builds that are building single cabins, which is encouraging. Anyone from a Norwegian cruise to the new Virgin cruise ships that Branson built, there are single cabins being built that may be smaller, but you avoid those supplements. In the cruise ship market, and I'll mention Silver Sea Cruise Lines, they are a luxury, all-inclusive cruise line. They've got some of the best single supplements out there. They might not be a 200% like a lot of others. They might be, depending on the sailing, the voyage, 110%, or a 25% increase. So there are cruise lines out there that have lower supplements. There are river cruise companies. We talk about Viking again. They have a big single supplement. You may not think as a single traveler about talc, and I'm a big talc fan in the all-inclusive realm, but just so you know, on their river boats, they sell their Category 1 cabins with no single supplement. So they're popular, and they get a lot of single travelers on their trips. So I love to sell them to singles because it's cost effective and they've got some like-minded people. So tour companies, the single supplements aren't as great as they are on a cruise ship. They might still have a supplements, a flat rate, but there's just no way to avoid them completely for all rounds. So I'd say let's have a conversation about it because there are companies out there. There are also a few tour companies that help you match with like-minded travelers if you don't mind off your costs as a single solo traveler and don't mind a roommate share, then they will help find you a same-sex roommate. And if they don't find you one, then you don't pay the supplement. So there are companies out there that do that as well. Somebody asked us, when can I travel to Europe again? Europe's big. There are a couple of countries that are open now, you guys, but all of Europe, it's not a cruise line or tour company thing, it's a border issue. So Greece is open, Croatia is open, the Holy Land is open, Egypt, Israel, Iceland just opened to US travelers. So we're excited to see some countries opening, and I just go back to Silver Sea and I'll say Seabourn, both of those lines just announced last week that they are going to be operating cruises in and out of Greece for US travelers. So there's some really positive stuff happening just as we speak. So it has to do with some of the vaccinations that are happening and getting these numbers down in other countries. But the whole of Western Europe, there's no set date. And I'll also mention that Canada has not given us a set date. And that's a biggie because that canceled the whole Alaska cruising season and train travel in Canada. And there was supposed to have been a decision made March 21st, and now it's supposed to be April 21st. We don't have any news of an opening date of Canada, and that's really crippled a lot of travel closer to home, obviously. That's a government thing. That's, again, there's no rhyme or reason, but all of the cruise lines had to just pull out of Alaska, aside from the small ships that sail just within Alaska that don't touch a Canadian border. US flagged cruises only are in Alaska. Land travel, guided tours, escorted tours are active in Alaska. So if that's of interest for this year, Insight Vacations, Colette, Globus, there are a handful of companies doing land tours in Alaska. And it's a great time to see that vast land if you haven't done it, because all the cruise ship tourism's not there. So it's pretty pure right now. So let's see, is there
I'm
a
looking,
good way to
there are some other Viking questions here. A couple people have asked some different questions about how Viking is doing for 2020, I guess 2021 cruises.
right.
And then there are 2022 cruises. And also, is Viking going to run river cruises in the US?
Yes. Okay. Yep. I see those. So Viking as a whole, you guys, for 2021, what we're seeing right now, and again, Viking is a big player for you guys as well as me. Right now, we are getting notices about 60 days out with cancellations, for example. They're really holding out on, they want to operate badly. So again, like with my European ocean and river cruises on Viking for this fall, anything past July, right now they are canceled through July 30th. And that's all we know. So they are holding out hope. The things that I've got booked from August and beyond have not yet been canceled. So again, there's no set date on any of it, but their popularity with their clients, and a lot of it's their marketing tactics, people are continuing to be hopeful with their cruises. And the second part of that, with their US river cruising, which will debut in 2022, they're fabulous. They're going to be the first to put their type of a riverboat on the Mississippi. It's been ongoing for a few years with them coming to the States, but they have a lot of dates that are already sold out. They were already doing that even before COVID. And then the Great Lakes cruising that Viking will do, and that Victory has already been doing, they hit Canada. So right now we can only hope that they're going to operate as planned for 2022. But if Viking US cruising is of interest on brand new boats, now is the time to think about it. Again, a lot of dates are already sold out. There's a couple of factors in that. People are comfortable staying closer to home, and they just want to go on Viking's new ships. They're going to give the US cruising market a run for their money. And the US river cruising market for this year is stacking up to be extremely popular. Again, you're on a boat, it's inclusive, it's the way of travel we love, and it's domestic. So somebody said that will be the 2022 Viking. Just another random question over here. Is there a good way to get a better deal on rental cars? They are more expensive than flights. That is a big topic right now, you guys. And I started listening to Peter Greenberg weekly travel series, and he hit the nail on the head a couple weeks ago when he was doing his weekly talk. We know that rental car rates have been up, where a car might have been $50 a day, it's now $175, whatever. It's a demand. And what we discovered was rental car companies sold off so much of their inventory, so much of their fleet, that there's not a lot of availability of cars, and they've inflated the prices so badly, it's ridiculous. There's no trick to getting a cheaper rate, I'm sorry to say. So yes, flying, using public transportation, Ubers, taxis, etc., when you can, avoid these inflated rental car costs is what we have to do. And we talked about Greece. Iceland's the biggie. We plan to go to Greece in October. Will we be able to go? Yes. I mean, as it stands, unless they have something that does a complete 180, Greece is open now. If I book a cruise through AAA and the cruise line's price reduction, yes, we always pass along discounts to our members. How far in advance should I renew a passport before expiration? let's just talk about passports for just a moment. If that's an important topic, because no one really has traveled in over a year or very limited travel, we may not have looked at our passports in a while. Always, passports have had to have at least 6 months validity past your return date of travel. So if you've got a trip booked for 2022, make sure your passport is going to be at least valid for 6 months past that. Renewing them at this point, at this stage of the game, it is taking a lot longer to renew, just because a lot of government offices aren't open. So a lot of mail sits in a mail room that's not being manned the way it used to be. So we used to tell people safely 8 to 12 weeks. I would give it 16 to 20 weeks to get your passport renewed, unless you need it expedited. But so that's, yeah, I think now is a very good time to look at your passports. Somebody asked about COVID passports. It's all just hearsay right now. There's nothing set in stone about COVID passports. We are seeing where there's a requirement to show proof of vaccine, just like your yellow cards with other vaccinations. Stick it in your passport if you're traveling. Right now, it's not a border requirement for most places. It's a vendor/cruise line requirement to show proof of vaccination. Many of you may have heard back in January, the US had started January 26th to be travel back into a country from anywhere outside of the country you go. You do have to show proof of a negative COVID test, even if you've been vaccinated, you guys, which is very interesting. But you have to show proof of a negative test before coming back into the country. So most resorts or cruise lines or tour companies you may have traveled with or are traveling with will help you arrange for that test within 72 hours of your return. And even though you've been vaccinated, our government is still requiring proof of that negative test to come back in. If you've already have a cruise plan but will need to wear a mask, can you cancel or change the cruise for a later date without being penalized? Most cruise companies and tour companies, I go back to this flexibility, getting out of what you can get into. It's called a variety of things, but basically most of these vendors have a risk-free guarantee. If you have insurance, insurance does not cover pandemic, bad hair day, fear of mask, whatever it is, but it's really your travel plans will fall under the flexibility that your cruise line or tour company has in place to let you have that peace of mind to back out of what you get into. Oh, somebody just asked what a yellow card is. If you've ever traveled, had to get yellow fever vaccinations, any type of vaccines to travel to Africa or somewhere else exotic that requires that, you get a yellow card from your doctor or Passport Health that shows what your current vaccines are. And if you're traveling to a destination that's going to require proof of that, that's the card that I'm referring to, is if you've had any vaccinations that have been required for travel to, mostly it's an exotic destination. We talked a little bit about some of the European countries that are open. East Africa is open. Ecuador, the Galapagos is open. Central America, Costa Rica is open. So not only is domestic travel to the national parks, Alaska, some of these guided tours in our Great Lands, there are some destinations that are slowly opening up with our guided tour partners. The trick here is the cruising outside of the country. Sherry, I think we've gotten to the bottom of those, and I know I'm long-winded. We can tackle.
Okay. Well, yeah. One of them, just kind of a, not really a follow-up, but it it's an extension of what you've been talking about. What about trip insurance? How does trip insurance fit in with like people having a trip planned and they have trip insurance, but the provider has flexibility and stuff? So how does that all work together?
Okay, so that's it's a little tricky, but if let's use biking as an example again, and this seems to be a popular cruise line. If you have Vikings insurance, and this would be the same if you have any vendor's insurance. Generally speaking, if they cancel on you and refund, you're getting all your money back. If you are rebooking or taking their FCC, a future cruise credit, or FTC, future travel credit, you'll hear that. The value of the insurance has typically been bundled into that amount of money you'll have to use in the future for that future trip you may rebook. Which means when you go to book that future trip, you have to buy new insurance again. So you've gotten the value of what you bought to bring your cruise total down, but you'll have to buy new insurance. So again, using biking, they have this wonderful risk-free guarantee. You can cancel your cruise with them up until 48 hours before your cruise, not for refund, but for travel credit. But that gives you that cancellation protection, but you still need insurance to travel. It's still highly recommended to have insurance to travel out of the country for medical, for medevac, for baggage, for unforeseen things. So you'll want to buy an additional insurance possibly, and there are lower insurance policies that would cover those items, not necessarily needing the cancellation protection, but for your actual travel. So we always recommend it. We're seeing some companies, that are requiring some type of insurance to travel, proof of. So insurance and AAA partners with Allianz, which is one of the national or worldwide insurance providers. Travel insurance across the board never covered pandemic or epidemic. That's been rewritten in the last 6 weeks, you guys. So there is a pandemic coverage, and you could go on the Allianz site. There's another great www.insuremytrip.com that compares coverages. But there is a pandemic clause in those, which really it's reading that if you contracted COVID while traveling, then it's coverages for that your additional stay, for changes, for things like that, for that medical part of that. But your cancellation protection is covered by, you would still want insurance to cover you for unforeseen cancellations, not necessarily COVID driven. So even with those risk-free guarantees, to be able for a cruise line tour company to say, you can cancel your trip and have a travel credit with us to go when you feel comfortable, you're still going to need to buy insurance to cover you while traveling. We recommend.
And then someone just asked this question: what do you think of the credit cards that provide travel insurance and
when paying with that card?
Yeah.
So I would say to you to look at what your credit card covers. And I remember years ago, a client breaking his foot at his daughter's wedding the day before a trip. And I looked at my stuff going, oh my gosh, he has no insurance. Well, he was fully covered, which I didn't know at the time, by his credit card, whatever it was, Marriott, whatever it was. He had full coverage. And I mean full meaning cancellation protection, as well as the coverage you need while you're out of the country. Again, that's for medical, medevac, hospitalization, and all that. Not all credit card coverages are created equal. So you'll want to check with your card company to see if the coverage they give you when you use that card is a cancellation protection, or is it providing you with some medical coverages while you are out of the country if you have an accident or an emergency situation. I can just give you another quick example. I had a group from Bluffton in Italy 2 years ago on a talc tour, and one of the gentlemen stepped up to get on the bus and fell on his and was in the hospital for 6 weeks. He had talc insurance, which was wonderful, but then because of the hospital bills, et cetera, his American Express card kicked in and covered the difference. So sometimes they have to work in tandem depending on how severe a situation could be. Sherry, do we want to tackle anything else specific over on our list? I'll just say this, one of the first questions you said, is travel going to look any different in 22 compared
to 19?
2019. I saw a statistic today. I sat in on a webinar this morning with Colette, which a lot of you know that tour company. They are worldwide, they are pioneering. And they said it's up 22% over what 2019 was, which is great. I mean, that's showing you this pent up demand. There's going to be a whole lot of spending because people are anxious to go.
Mm-hmm. I think this question, you've talked about it a little bit, but it's how do we know where we need vaccines? And I think that alludes to, like, what are the requirements for either being vaccinated if you get to a country, and how are travelers going to find out that information? Whether they have to be vaccinated or they have to test negative or
right
on a COVID test or what?
So again, I'll mention, as far as testing negative, this mandate that the US put on that was effective January 26th, whether you're vaccinated or not, that is a mandatory requirement of our government to come back into the US. You have to have a negative test to enter back in. That negative test has to occur within 72 hours of coming home. So if you have an organized trip, and this is all today's rules, you guys, we don't know what the rules are going to be next year. They might loosen up, we don't know. But that is a requirement of our government, not a cruise line, not a tour company. We require that. What we're seeing with that requirement is a talc tour, for example, with the information that I'm getting on people that I currently have booked that are currently scheduled to travel this fall. Again, nothing's been canceled past July. They're sending updated information to me from my travelers. So if any of you are working through an agent, your agent would be your point of contact to get that information. Or if you've booked anything direct with a cruise line or tour company, they should give you that information on how they are helping you handle that, which means the hotel you're in the last 2 nights and they've scheduled the testing to be done at that hotel. The vendors are really participating in that assistance of getting the test. When you mention about the vaccinations, and Sherry and I both saw the same Condé Nast update today on countries that Americans can visit as long as you are vaccinated. And we're not seeing a whole lot of mandatory borders or borders that are requiring a vaccine. They're requiring negative testing. I'm seeing more vendors requiring a vaccine. But some of these countries that are currently open to US travelers, it's negative testing, not specifically vaccinated travelers.
Are there quarantine requirements in some locations? Like you travel somewhere and you've got to quarantine?
Yes, there are. And to be honest, you guys, we don't get as much of an industry update any more than you get. And I did get with my marketing person just right before this, the latest that she just sent, and Sherry, I can send it to you, but NewYorkTimes.com, you guys, we've been following that, and we do get a couple industry emails that will use these same sources for the current corona travel restrictions, and they are almost updated daily. So There are some countries that are saying, yay, we accept all Americans, again, with negative testing. Again, when we're to Costa Rica, it's not, the vaccines aren't required. And as I'll go back to this Peter Greenberg, and I'll just share personally, you guys, I mean, I've never put anything into my body that's not organic. I don't take medications. I don't do anything like that. But travel is very much a part of who I am in my world. And as Peter Greenberg put it, if this is the price of admission to travel, then it's the price of admission many of us are going to have here. I want to travel. And if a cruise line, and I'm booked on a cruise for November, it requires a vaccination. It's going to be a personal choice to folks how they're going to adjust their travel habits.
Changing the subject a little bit, let's talk about hotels for a couple minutes. What changes can people expect with hotels when traveling?
So I don't know if any of you have decided to be road warriors in this last year, since we've not been able to travel extensively, but I sure have. Last April, if we didn't rip that Band-Aid off then and start doing some road trips for me to stay sane and see all this, what I'm seeing in most hotels that I've been to, just in the US, and I have been to Mexico twice as well, but occupancy levels are down. So you're seeing hotels may be filling at 50% occupancy. When I went to Mexico, I went to Cabo last November and then Cancun in January, occupancy levels were at 30%. But then they slowly started to increase to 50 to 70. Nothing in the hotel industry that I've heard of is back to full capacity. So you'll see not all rooms are being used. Some of the issues with capacity is staffing issues, sadly. It's making sure that they've got the proper staff. They're not doing housekeeping daily, but have access at the front desk for anything you need, like your extra coffee or towels. So they're just not doing, hotels are not operating the way they would as far as daily housekeeping and the occupancy. I'm also seeing, which blows my mind, that most every hotel I've been to accepts pets now. And I don't know if that's just answering this call to domestic travel, which we know, living in a tourism destination, this area is tapped out. We're at 100% occupancy just on the island for what occupancy is. And again, 50 to 70% is what we're seeing. When you ask about what changes booking hotels, there are hotels that still have cheaper rates for non-refundable pricing. So you can go price driven and have more penalty to cancel, or flexible pricing and being able to cancel without penalty. So again, it's about getting out of what you can get into. And along these same lines about hotels, we are getting a lot of calls, being AAA, and we do a lot of drive assistance as well. Folks that want to travel domestically on their own, so not through a tour company, and let's say the national parks, because everybody's like, well, we'll go and travel and see this country this year. Occupancy is so minimal, you guys, or availability, I should say, because everyone's doing what we want to do. So trying to go out to Yellowstone this July on your own and get a rental car that's already inflated, and trying to find availability in hotels, it's slim. And I'm not going to say anything's impossible, but it's so difficult to find space, especially in tourism destinations, whether that means down the coast of Florida or going out west. Occupancy is so high right now that it's hard to find availability. Having said that, if anything like a national parks trip is on your radar because you can go this year, these tour companies that are operating trips, They negotiate and lock in their space years in advance. They've got secured guaranteed departures with hotel space. And a tour bus can get you in the accessibility in these national parks, where if you look up anything for Yellowstone for this week, you're going to see, we call it the Toyota migration, lines of cars backed up because everybody's going.
So we're about out of time, but a question was asked that I think is interesting. When returning to the States, if we test positive for COVID and need to quarantine, would our travel insurance cover the hotel expense?
So good question. You're not going to be able to come back into the States until you test negative. So I'm going to use Mexico again as an example, just because I happened to go in January and we were coming home 2 days before this whole thing played out, the January 26th restriction. But I've been keeping on top of it and sending people to Mexico because it's been very easy to go there. Resorts, if you are in the Caribbean, Mexico, wherever, and you test positive prior to coming back, most of what I'm seeing, your hotels have a very flexible rate, a very inexpensive $10 a night or something, to have you stay there, to continue your quarantine until you taste. What this new update to travel insurance, that does cover part of it. That's part of what they've updated on travel insurance, is to cover epidemic, pandemic, positive testing assistance with those added bills. Did that answer the question? We will be cruising before returning. If that's somebody that's asking the same question, your cruise line, if you're on a ship and that's within 72 hours of coming home, they're going to test you. And if you test positive, they are going to have you disembark in the port you're in, but you would have to stay there in the hotel. There should be more of that information on the cruise line's current travel restrictions. And if you want to side message me, if I'm happy to help you look into that, Terry.
Okay. So, well, I think that we have covered most of the questions that were asked in one way or another. Are there any additional things you want to say in closing?
No, and I think we did talk generically about it, and seems like cruising is most popular. Every cruise line is ready for capacity. And is it going to look different? Yeah, you're not going to have self-service buffets anymore, you guys. Your capacity in your shows, we don't know what that's going to look like, but it seems that the cruises, when they do start initially, it will be at smaller capacity so that they can have that full 50% capacity in the dining room or in the theater. Shore excursions, we're hearing that cruise lines are going to require you to do their shore excursions right now, depending on where you're going. But you guys, I'm always happy to talk with any of you. Sherry knows how to get a hold of me. And if you don't know how, feel free to call or email me, and I'll be happy to answer any specific questions for you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for being with us today and talking about the travel industry and kind of what we can kind of expect to find in the coming weeks, at least, and probably the coming months.
Yeah.
For those of you in attendance, when I sent out the email with the link this morning, I did include Kelly's email I included Kelly on that email. So at the top of that email, you should see her email address. So if you have questions for her, feel free to just email her and she will get back with you. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah,